This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's October 8th, 2024. A lot of important battles through history were fought on this date. The Yom Kippur War started on this day in 1973. This day in 1939 is when Germany annexed Poland. The First Balkan War started on this day in 1912. In China, the Second Opium War began on this day in 1856. And back in 1480, a battle called the Great Stand put an end to Tatar rule in Moscow. This is not even a complete list. But this date also marks the anniversary of a really unusual wartime victory at the hands of a Tennessean that ended up making a fundamental difference for children on the Cumberland Plateau. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. We'll have a newscast update on the latest in a few minutes, followed by the second installment of this week's excerpts from senior music writer Julie Hight's Making Noise miniseries. But first, I want to tell you about Alvin C. York. York was not the kind of guy anyone would ever peg as a war hero. He was morally opposed to violence in any form for any reason. As the child of subsistence farmers in Fentress County, he did learn to shoot. In fact, he was really, really good at it. But in his mid-20s, he found God in the Church of Christ and Christian Union. The denomination had a strict moral code, including a total ban on violence. And he was a real believer. A few years later, the United States entered World War I and opened up the draft to fill out the ranks of the military. All young men were legally required to sign up. And in June of 1917, York's name was selected. He tried to fight it on religious grounds. York filed to be officially declared a conscientious objector. He got a written testimony from his pastor. But the Church of Christ and Christian Union was not an officially recognized church, so the government denied his request. York reluctantly showed up for duty that fall. He tried making his case directly to the officers at Camp Gordon in Georgia. He spent hours in discussion, swapping Bible references and debating the ethics of war with Major Edward Buxton. The request was still denied. But something about that conversation convinced York that it was better to submit to his orders than to go AWOL on principle. York was sent to France, immediately assigned to take part in the largest American offensive in the war. And on this day, in 1918, he was part of a small group tasked with capturing a railroad. But they had trouble reading the map. They ended up behind enemy lines, pinned down by Germans who quickly picked off 9 of the 17 in his squad, including the sergeant in charge, from a machine gun. York took control, slowly and deliberately, shooting with incredible accuracy. York managed to make his way to the machine gun nest and gain control of the entire situation. That turned the tide. With York in such a powerful position, the German commander surrendered his entire unit of 90 men. Along the way back to the American encampment, York took more German prisoners. By the time they returned, they had 132 surrendered German soldiers at hand. York became a national hero, both for his incredible courage under fire and ability to kill 20 enemies in that action, but also for the fact that he was able to take command in such a way that so very many enemies surrendered to his relatively tiny group of 8 surviving American soldiers. His battle was marked as much by the lives that didn't end as it was by the killing that occurred. York was promoted, of course, and given medals by both the American and French governments. He was celebrated throughout both nations, and that changed his life utterly. York finally had a chance to bolster his own education. As a poor farm boy in Fentress County, he'd barely even learned to read. York hired a tutor and trained as a public speaker. Then he moved into the next phase, leveraging his fame to make a difference back home. York toured the U.S., raising funds to open a high school for the poorest children in Fentress County, kids like himself who were basically living a life still stuck in the 19th century. He was incredibly successful at gaining the support of backers in areas like New England. But pointing out the inadequacies of his own community to the outside world made some folks back home pretty unhappy. People accused him of being a troublemaker and tried to block his efforts, calling them unwarranted and illegal. But he persisted, and the Alvin C. York Institute opened in the late 1920s. York mortgaged his farm twice to keep the school open. The state took over during the Great Depression, and the school is still in operation today. It's a unique facility, 400 acres that also operate as a Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency management area. The students manage a herd of cattle and have ponds for learning to manage the populations of fish and waterfowl. But most importantly, they have the kind of solid high school education that simply did not exist in that community until York made sure that it was created. York promoted the school and raised money for it for the rest of his life. His status as a war hero only seemed valuable to him as a means of opening the door to talk to people about the importance of rural education. And in fact, when someone asked him how he'd like to be remembered, he didn't have anything to say about his astounding action in World War I. He reportedly said he wanted to be known for improving education in Tennessee. In just a few minutes, the second installment in our week of excerpts from Making Noise about a revolutionary blossoming in Black Nashville's music scene. That's after the newscast.
Here's the mantra I think about at WPLN. We connect the dots. It captures a mindset that our journalism is not merely about the latest press release or proclamations by officials. Instead, we can develop expertise, dig deeper, and look to history to understand what's happening now. I'm Tony Gonzalez, news director. When I'm planning coverage and editing stories, the best part is being part of a team that's curious about our community and invested in its future.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. A federal judge is delaying a high-profile bribery trial. Former Tennessee House Speaker Glenn Cassida and his ex-chief of staff, Cade Cothran, face multiple charges of conspiracy to commit fraud and theft from federal funds. Cothran is accused of secretly running a company that sent out state-funded constituent mailers for lawmakers. His identity was hidden because he'd been pushed out of his position running Speaker Cassida's office after a sexting scandal. Cassida and another legislator, former Representative Robin Smith, allegedly received kickbacks for directing business to the firm. Smith pleaded guilty and is cooperating with prosecutors. The Tennessee Lookout reports the holdup in the trial is because prosecutors did not properly redact sensitive information from some of the evidence she provided. The trial is now scheduled for April 22nd. An aggressive campaign mailer in a closely watched state house contest is drawing outrage from Democrats. The direct mail piece from the Tennessee Republican Party includes photos of candidate Allie Phillips' 7-year-old daughter. Phillips is the newcomer to the House District 75 contest against incumbent Republican Jeff Burkhart, who's been in office for 2 years. In a campaign video posted on his website, he describes himself as more conservative than a lot of Republicans.
Government should be run like you run your household, not on borrowed money, strictly by we set a budget and we're going to live by it. We don't build a road in Tennessee that's not paid for when it's built.
Meanwhile, Phillips gained social media notoriety after telling her personal story of navigating the state's reproductive rights landscape. She went to New York to get an abortion after her fetus was deemed non-viable and a risk to her health, but not enough to get the procedure locally. Now she's hoping to change that law, improve infrastructure, and make other improvements to our state.
For me, I want to go into this to help people. If that takes me 10 years to get it done, then it takes me 10 years to get it done.
Early voting begins October 16th. A key concept in Nashville's proposed transit overhaul is something called Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT. This form of high-capacity transit is sometimes hailed as a cheaper alternative to light rail. It can feature things like transit-only lanes or traffic signals that turn green only for buses. But if Nashville's transit referendum is approved, the BRT system would look different on different streets. For example, some major corridors are being considered to become dedicated lanes, while others are not. And then there's the chance that changes could be different even on this same street. WeGo's director Steve Bland uses Murfreesboro Pike as an example.
In this segment of, say, Murfreesboro Pike, we really need dedicated lanes or queue jumps because traffic is really complex and unpredictable. and another section where it's relatively reliable or, generally moving well, maybe operating in general traffic is fine.
Nashville's transit referendum is asking voters to approve a half-cent sales tax increase to fund a major transit overhaul. In addition to the proposed bus rapid transit, this would be used for new sidewalks, updated signals, a dozen new transit centers, and more. And if the referendum fails, Bland says WeGo would still try and implement BRT along Murfreesboro Pike. If it passes, BRT would be brought to 10 of Nashville's busiest roadways, with at least 4 receiving transit-only lanes. Community Health Systems has sold dozens of hospitals in the past few years, but has not bought any new ones. Becker's Hospital Review thinks that probably won't change anytime soon, given the Franklin-based company's long-term debt. That stands at more than $11 billion as of July, when Community Health released its quarterly report. The Franklin-based company used to be the largest hospital chain in the world, but its facility count has been dwindling for years. It has sold 29 hospitals since 2020. Community Health recently sold its Tenova Hospital in Cleveland, Tennessee, a small town east of Chattanooga. That went for $160 million. The company is expected to sell 3 more facilities this year, all in Pennsylvania. CHS told investors earlier this year the goal is to make $1 billion in hospital sales. A University of Tennessee football player is apologizing for a shove that sent 2 Arkansas fans to the ground. The incident happened after the Vols' upset loss to the Razorbacks on Saturday. As the Arkansas crowd rushed the field, video shows Amari Thomas giving a hard shove to one fan who passed him. The man fell, knocking over a woman in the process. In a statement on social media, Thomas indicates he was frustrated by multiple people bumping into him, but says that does not make his actions okay. He says he sincerely apologizes and wishes the best for the Razorbacks and their fans. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Our Making Noise series shines a light on Love Noise, the concert promotion group that's been cultivating a scene for Black musical expression since the early 2000s. In this excerpt, senior music writer Julie Height details an early breakthrough for Love Noise.
In the early 2000s, Holt and his fellow Love Noise founders were fairly new to putting on events, but savvy enough to learn from what was already working in Nashville. Holt saw the usefulness in studying a couple of country-oriented showcases that were institutions in the city. One was the Bluebird Cafe, folksy but famous home to writers' rounds.
When I was 14, I was falling fast for a blue-eyed girl in my homeroom class.
Securing spots in those rounds said something about songwriters' reputations, namely that they were legit. So Holt started comparing the curated open mics of the Love Noise Sunday night to the Bluebird.
Like the Bluebird, we were a platform for Black art. Most of the people that played Love Noise the first decade were local, unsigned talent. And very much like the Bluebird, our stage was respected.
He also noted the promotion approach of Billy Block's Western Beat, a weekly show that drew industry attention to emerging alt-country acts.
Reading the newspaper back then, I always saw these ads for this artist, Billy Block. He was a well-known country curator and talent.
I have been a big fan of this guy's for years. He's been on Western Beat a number of times. He's got everything you need to make it in the music business.
I always saw a radio station promoting Billy Block and Nashville scene supporting his open mics. I was like, how did he get the radio station to support this? How did he get Nashville scene to be a sponsor? So I just called the number on the ad and I said, hey, would you be willing to have lunch with me? I want to ask you some questions. He said, sure. I bought him lunch and Billy Block told me how he got that deal done.
The key, Holt learned, was cross-promotion for free. So he followed suit, working out an arrangement where the alt weekly The Nashville Scene would run ads announcing each lineup. The other piece of the puzzle was partnering with the adult R&B radio station 92Q to create the Love Noise radio.
My
name is Kenny Smooth. I'm the program director for 92Q and now vice president of urban formats for Cumulus Media.
Wake up in the morning. He's on the go. You got Stevie, keep it easy, you'll be loving.
Kenny first heard about Love Noise as he drove into Nashville to take his new position at the station on a Sunday in 2005.
One of the talents that was on the air, and Fiona, and I heard her doing her thing.
He called in just like any other listener, not identifying himself as the new boss.
Hey, you know, what's going on tonight? Well, there's this thing, Love Noise, and you can go and check that out. So I was like, cool, I think I'll go check it out. So I go down there. And when I saw the vibe that they were building, I was like, this.
It's like sunshine, water, and rain.
That's the voice of Kenny Smoove in our miniseries Making Noise. Julie Height is the reporter and host. You can stream the full stories in the WNXP podcasts feed or on our website. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.